Night wasn't just a time on this stretch of Interstate 47, it was the road itself. I drove my truck at a steady speed, seeing nothing beyond the strip of asphalt lit by my headlights. No town lights, no gas station signs, not a single oncoming vehicle. The navigation screen was silent, just a straight line and the occasional no signal warning. It was 2:13 a.m. I knew that because checking the time was a habit during night drives. Time was the enemy of sleep, but tonight I was dealing with something heavier than fatigue. A restlessness had settled in, one I couldn't explain, as if the road wasn't taking me anywhere, only stretching itself longer. As I eased off the brake, I noticed something ahead. At first I thought it was a reflection, then I saw it move. An old sedan was pulled over on the shoulder. The hood was up. The hazard lights weren't on. And then the silhouette stepping into my headlights became clear. A woman. I slowed down without meaning to. Company training. Safety briefings, years of instinct. They all said the same thing. Don't stop at night. Never stop on an empty road. But she raised her hand. It wasn't dramatic. She wasn't panicking. She just looked tired, like someone who had been waiting for a long time. I stopped the truck. I rolled the window down a few inches. Cold air spilled into the cab. "Are you okay?" I asked. My voice sounded unfamiliar even to me. She took a few steps closer. Her face sharpened in the headlights. Early 30s, maybe. She wore a thin jacket, not enough for the cold. Her hair was messy, but not rushed like someone had deliberately messed it up. "The car died," she said. "My phone's dead, too." "Is the nearest city far?" I checked the mirror. The road was completely empty. "About 40 kilometers, I said. "No signal out here." She nodded. I figured. She paused, then looked straight at me. "Can you take me?" The question hung in the cab. Every instinct I had told me to say no, but she didn't step back. There was no insistence, no threat, just waiting. "I'll keep the door locked," I said, more to convince myself. "Just until the city." She smiled. That smile didn't sit right with me. It came and went too fast. The door opened. She climbed into the cab. When the door shut, the sound echoed more than it should have. I pulled back onto the road, checking the mirrors more often now. "Claire Holloway," she said. Her voice was steady. No clear accent. Her hands rested on her knees. That's when I noticed her fingers weren't shaking. She didn't look scared. We drove in silence for a while. Then I noticed the smell, metallic, not oil, not gasoline, sharper, almost sterile. "Is this road always like this?" she asked. "Does no one come through at night?" "Sometimes," I said, "but most of the time." I saw movement in the side mirror. A silhouette stood on the roadside a few hundred meters back, then another. They vanished before the headlights reached them, but I knew we weren't alone. I eased off the gas. My heart picked up. "Is something wrong?" Claire asked. I didn't answer. My eyes drifted to the floor beneath the passenger seat. A small white object was hanging from the edge, a plastic restraint, a zip tie, and on the floor something that had fallen from her pocket, a phone battery without its cover. A cold wave ran through me. These weren't a cry for help. They were markers. I was certain now this woman wasn't a coincidence, and neither was this road. Without taking my eyes off the road, I tried to steady my breathing. The zip tie under the seat and the phone battery on the floor flashed in my mind. They weren't forgotten. They were placed there on purpose. Someone wanted me to notice them. The engine droned steadily as I deliberately slowed down. Sudden acceleration meant panic. Panic led to the wrong questions. Wrong questions led to the wrong kind of attention. This road didn't like being observed. Claire was silent, but not passively so. She was listening to my gear shifts, my breathing, the tires pressing into the asphalt. It was the silence of someone waiting for the right moment. When I checked the mirror again, the silhouettes were clearer this time. They weren't on the shoulder anymore. They were on the road itself. The light never fully touched them, and their shapes changed slightly with every glance. They resembled people, but their joints were too smooth, as if they weren't made for walking, but for approaching. "You shouldn't stop here," Claire said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "If you stop, they'll take it as an invitation." I swallowed. "Who are they?" I asked. She didn't answer. She reached into her jacket pocket. I tightened my grip on the wheel, but she slowly pulled her hand out. In her palm was a small, worn car key. "Mine," she said. "I don't need it anymore." That was when I really looked at her. I saw the bruises on her wrists, one on the inside, another hidden beneath a watch mark. They had been concealed, but not erased. These weren't from an accident. "You're not one of them," I said. She shook her head. "But I crossed their path," she said. "They left me here. Either I stop you, or they would come back for me." Something slammed into the trailer. Then again. It didn't feel like metal, it felt alive. I hit the gas. The engine roared. The silhouettes multiplied in the mirrors. They weren't hiding anymore. "The Raventoport exit is coming up," Claire said. "Don't take it." I knew. It existed on maps, but not in reality. The ghost of a failed industrial project. The impacts grew stronger, as if the truck was being held. "Now," Claire said, unbuckling her seatbelt, "no matter what you see, don't stop." The road narrowed. Trees pressed in. The headlights caught a rusted control booth on the roadside. Its door hung open. The inside was pitch black. I slowed down, but I didn't stop. She opened the door. Cold air flooded the cab. She looked at me. For the first time, there was real fear in her eyes. "They won't remember me," she said. "But they might remember you." And she stepped out. I didn't stop. When I checked the mirror, she was gone, as if she had never been there. The pounding stopped. The silhouettes dissolved into the dark. The road began to look like an ordinary highway again. Hours later, I stopped at a rest area. The police arrived. I told them everything. They asked about Raventoport. There was no record of it. They searched the truck. No marks on the trailer. Inside the cab, they found only two things: a plastic zip tie and a phone battery without a cover. I never drove that road at night again. But some nights when I'm behind the wheel, I see a reflection in the window, a look in my face that isn't mine. And I remember this. I didn't stop, but the road remembered me. It was night time, and the weight of my road weariness pressed down on my shoulders like a stone. I pulled my car up in front of a small rest stop. Only a dim yellow light flickered on its sign, the words, "Everett's Rest Stop," shimmering faintly. I was sweltering from the heat. The car's air conditioning seemed to have stopped working, so I rolled down the windows to let in some fresh air and stepped inside for a short break. There was a strange silence in the rest stop. The cashier sat in the corner, absorbed in an old magazine. A few tables were empty. Only the coffee machine hummed softly. After hours of passing chatter and road noise, this silence was almost eerie. When the urge to use the restroom hit, I thought, after all this driving, I deserve a little relief, and headed toward the indicated door. When I opened it, I was met with an unusual sight for a hot summer night. A woman inside the restroom wore an unusually heavy coat, almost reaching her throat, with a strange hat perched on her head. Despite the hot, humid, oppressive air, she was dressed as if walking through a cold, gloomy place. Squinting, I noticed her face partially hidden in shadow, her gaze seemingly locked onto me. The woman pretended to leave the restroom. She cracked the door open, stepped forward, then returned, and silently vanished into the shadows. She was motionless but watching me. A shiver ran down my spine. My heart raced, but I stayed calm. I tried to gauge her intentions. If I didn't make any sudden movements or noises, maybe I had simply encountered a peculiar person. Inside the restroom, a silence stretched between us. Time seemed to slow, carrying an inexplicable weight with every moment. I avoided eye contact and moved to the sink to wash my hands. The cold metal of the faucet offered some comfort, but her presence still lingered. When I stepped away from the sink, I noticed a shadow seemingly hiding behind the toilet paper dispenser. I tilted my head slightly. Her eyes were still on me. We locked eyes for a brief second, and I held my breath. It was impossible to tell if this was a human being or something else. It's fine, just a normal person. Maybe just a strange traveler, I told myself. I carefully stepped toward the door, keeping track of her movements. When I reached the door and looked around, she was gone. I exhaled deeply and stepped outside. The humid night air softened the rest stop's silence. Back in my car, an uneasy feeling lingered. It was as if someone was still watching the moment I looked away. I locked the doors, started the engine, and drove away from the rest stop, but I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. The darkness of the night and the lonely road had not shaken off the impact of what had just happened. Though I tried to leave that night behind, her silhouette still haunted the corner of my vision. As I drove, I found myself trying to understand why my heart was still pounding before reaching the next rest stop. The night was silent and heavy, but her eyes remained etched in my mind. As the night went on, the lights along the road flickered on and off. My headlights cut sharply through the darkness, only to leave black night behind again. As the lights of Everett's rest stop faded behind me, a weight still pressed on my chest. The woman's gaze repeated in my mind as if she were pausing at every turn, watching me from the shadows. I tried to calm myself until I reached the next rest stop, but my thoughts refused to settle. The restroom door, the cold metal sink, her movements, everything played in my mind like a film strip. Who dresses like that? Hiding in a restroom to watch a stranger. Driving cautiously, my phone rang. The screen showed an unknown number. When I answered, a whisper came through. "I'm right here." My heart jumped again. I immediately hung up, but the voice echoed in my mind. My imagination alone couldn't have conjured this fear someone was really there, and perhaps it was the woman from Everett's rest stop. When I arrived at the next rest stop, I parked the car and locked the doors. Inside, the silence enveloped me again, but this time there was a subtle whisper. At first I thought it was the wind, but then I realized it was the woman's voice. "You're here," she said, so cold and quiet that it made the hair on my arms stand on end. I turned and looked down the hallway. She wasn't there, but the voice seemed to come from inside the walls. I moved silently, but my footsteps echoed unnaturally, multiplying in the empty space. My heart pounded in my chest. A feeling told me that getting through this night would not be easy. Suddenly, the front door creaked open. A cold draft swept in, and my spine tingled. The woman had entered. The dark shadow beneath her heavy coat nearly merged with the walls. As she approached, her face remained hidden, but her eyes shone like light. I tried to step back, but the hallway seemed longer, narrower, darker with every step. She moved silently, deliberate in every motion, her gaze sharp. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, but when I opened them, she was still in front of me, almost close enough to feel her breath. I realized then that she was not just an oddly dressed traveler. Her presence was like a shadow that absorbed the night's silence, carrying an energy my eyes could not perceive. For a moment I saw her slowly raise her hands, as if beckoning me somewhere. My instincts screamed to run. I bolted. I ran out of the rest stop toward my car, but the hallways seemed to stretch endlessly, doors closing in front of me. My heart felt like it would explode. Finally, I opened the door, jumped into my car, and started the engine. My headlights cut through the darkness, but I sensed a movement on the back seat. I quickly glanced in the mirror. Her silhouette sat there in the rear seat. "No, this can't be," I shouted. I sped away, but the road seemed like an infinite loop. At every turn, her silhouette stared at me from behind. Aside from my own breathing and the engine's hum, there was silence, but I could not look away from the rearview mirror. Eventually, the first light of morning appeared on the horizon. Her silhouette slowly faded against the dawn. I was alone in my car, sweaty, breathless, my heart still racing, my hands trembling. Once more, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing was there. That morning, when I reached the city lights, the rest stops sign still flickered in dim yellow. Everett's rest stop was not just a pit stop. It was a place that fed on the night and shadows, testing the human mind. After that day, I never drove alone at night again. And still, on summer nights, I imagine a lone woman in a heavy coat, silently waiting along a deserted stretch of road. It was midnight, and the town was draped in silence. The car headlights partially illuminated the empty streets, with nothing moving except for the occasional trash can or flag swaying in the wind. I, Lucas Harper, had decided to go to the market alone to shake off the fatigue of the weekend. The 24-hour Hawthorne Market was practically the only place in town that offered nighttime shopping. As I drove, I felt a familiar unease. Going to a market alone at night always made one slightly anxious. But I brushed it off. I urgently needed a few basic groceries. The moment I stepped through the market's door, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Even during dull night shifts, there was usually a faint hum, the soft voice of a cashier, or the metallic clatter of products on the shelves. But that night, the market felt frozen in time, completely still. I grabbed a shopping cart and headed down the aisles. The shelves glimmered faintly under the neon lights, and the aisles seemed unusually empty and dark. I was about to turn toward the tomatoes when a strange figure from the back aisles caught my eye. There, sitting on the floor as if staring into a refrigerator, was a man. At first, I couldn't believe my eyes. His posture was unnatural, almost as if he had let his body's weight drop to the floor. His face was blank, his eyes glossy, but seeing nothing, or perhaps seeing everything, yet nothing at all. A wave of deep fear washed over me. I instinctively took a step back, but my curiosity was stronger. No matter what he was doing, this man was not normal. As I got closer, I realized his movements were extremely slow and strange. He lifted his hand as if touching empty air, then dropped it again. He made no sound, only breathed, but even that seemed abnormal. The fluorescent lights cast a pale glow on his face, and the pallor of his skin and lifeless gaze gave the impression of someone who hadn't truly lived for a long time. My fear began to rise. I felt the tension in my body, but forcing myself not to panic, I decided to finish my shopping quickly. I hurried along the aisles, keeping my eyes on him while grabbing what I needed. For a moment, his silhouette seemed to vanish as if he had never been there. My heart pounded in my chest as I made my way to the cashier and paid. The cashier looked at me drowsily. For him, this night might have been ordinary, but for me, it had been a nightmare. Once outside, a faint breeze swept through the streets, and the silence returned. Walking toward my car, I kept glancing at the market's dark back corner, but the man was gone. I felt a sense of relief, but it was short-lived. As I started my car and turned on the engine, I saw him again in a beam of light across the park. He seemed to appear out of nowhere, watching me. My heart raced once more. The man walked toward a bench and then to an old car parked in the lot. I watched in shock as he got into the vehicle and sped away, disappearing as if he raced from the town. At that moment, I realized that going to the market alone at night was far more dangerous than I had imagined. The man's presence, his silence, and his sudden disappearance revealed the town's nocturnal face. Unseen, unknown, and unexplainable danger. Sitting in my car, I took a few deep breaths, but questions swirled in my mind. Who was he? Why was he sitting in the market's back aisle? And why had he later gotten into a car in the park and vanished? That night, trying to sleep, the man's strange gaze in the market's back aisle haunted me. Every heartbeat felt as if it echoed that stare. I had understood the risk of shopping alone at night, but I also realized something else. In this town, unseen darkness could appear when you least expect it. And sometimes just a look could leave a permanent mark on a person's soul. The next morning, I woke up still shaken by the night's events. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I remembered the man's blank stare in the market's back aisle. While making my coffee, I kept questioning myself. Maybe I dreamed it, I told myself. But the image of the car in the park where he had gotten in was still vivid in my mind. It was far too real to be a dream. I grabbed my phone and marked the market's location on the map. Maybe it would help make sense of things. That evening, driven by a mix of curiosity and fear, I decided to pass near the park. I slowly parked my car at the edge and carefully scanned my surroundings as I walked. The park was empty. Shadows stretched between the trees, reminiscent of the night before. But a strange unease lingered inside me, as if someone were watching. Every step I took The rustling leaves and the whistling wind combined with my heartbeat into a strange symphony. Then, at the other end of the park, the silhouette of an old sedan appeared. The car looked alarmingly familiar. There were no lights on inside, but I sensed movement. The man was there. Sitting in the front seat, he seemed as if he had been waiting. My heart nearly stopped. What should I do? Run? Hide? But my curiosity, mingled with a timid courage, pushed me toward the car. The man didn't move inside the vehicle, but that gaze, cold, death-like, struck me directly. Panic surged within me. I tried to control my breathing, but my hands were shaking. Then suddenly, the car's headlights flicked on. Squinting, I looked at him. He was still there, but his facial features seemed to melt into something surreal. It was as if he carried the human form like an illusion through the darkness of the night. Then, abruptly, he stepped out of the car and vanished silently into the park. I froze, holding my breath as I watched. Moments later, a distant engine roar startled me. I rushed back to my car and left the park, but my mind remained full of the man's image, lifeless eyes staring, following me like a ghost in the night. The next day, I returned to the market and examined the aisle where the event had occurred. No one was there. No trace remained. The shelves were the same. The fluorescent lights flickered with the same rhythm. Yet my feelings hadn't changed. The market's back aisle still appeared dark and dangerous, a secret. The town during the day was safe. People laughed, cars passed, children ran. But at night, in the silence of the dark, there was another face of fear, one that exposed the deepest anxieties of a person.